Has your child suddenly started tantruming out of nowhere? My name's Jodie Thornton, and today I want to talk about what can we do when your child has been perfectly calm and regulated and everything's been fine, but all of a sudden we've got tantrums happening over the littlest things and it's really consistent and constant. So our number one job is actually to look at what is their baseline regulation. And so what I mean by that is that if we imagine that your child can hold so many feelings before they get overwhelmed, and then when they get overwhelmed, it becomes a tantrum, we can extend the capacity your child has to hold on to feelings by looking at their baseline nervous system regulation. Now, this isn't necessarily going to solve the root cause of the problem that we have that's causing all these tantrums to happen, but it does mean that we have less tantrums to deal with, which means that we have better chance of staying calm ourselves, a better chance of being able to skillfully hold space for them, and obviously it's less stressful for your child as well. So what do we need to do there? We need to find an activity that helps your child get into a meditative state that is easy for you to do in your week-to-week routine, right? So if we think about what that might be, meditation is the most obvious one, and don't laugh, some children really do meditate, and if you've got one, congratulations, it makes life a lot easier. But meditation is a great one. So whether they use a guided meditation or whether you're even teaching them Vipassana at a young age, if your child is willing and able to meditate, that is a really great way to help them to regulate their nervous system. If your child is not a meditator, which is totally normal, vast majority of children don't, then what we can do is look for something that gets them into a similarly flow state. So something that really relaxes them and get to that sense of like that the time isn't really an issue now. Now, for some children, it can be as simple as drawing, it can be hugging, it can be painting. What we're looking for is not necessarily the best activity, the one that gets them most into that flow state, the one that is realistic and practical for you to use regularly for your child. So this being the case, when we find what that activity is, we want to do two things. We want to use it often, so whether it's part of your daily or weekly routine, and we also want to use it at the time when your child is most likely to be upset. So if you're finding that the tantrums are happening more frequently when they're having sibling playtime, maybe you do your regulating activity before the playtime or maybe after the playtime, right? So they know that something is coming after the stressful experience. So that's our number one thing, is to really look at what relaxes them. Now, it's also useful to ask your child, when does your body feel most relaxed? It's interesting to ask a child this question, even when they're quite young. I remember when I asked Alyssa, one of my children, when does her body feel most relaxed? And she said the pool, which is an interesting thing because at the time we weren't going to the pool very regularly. And so I wouldn't have connected it with, I don't know that I even recognized that it was such a relaxing activity for her. But secondly, I definitely wouldn't have thought of it given that we didn't do it that regularly at that time. And so for me personally, getting to the pool regularly is not practical, but giving them a bath that's really quite highly filled is possible, so long as we're not in a place where we need to conserve water, right? So that was something that I could practically do to get her into a bath more regularly, particularly when she's having a stressful time. So that, so like a really highly filled bath. So we're looking for what is practical for you. So if you have a situation where what's most relaxing for them isn't practical, look for other options. It's not it doesn't have to be the best. And also there's not just like one solution to this problem. There will be options. You may need to even try some different things out and see what works for your child. So the second thing we want to do when we have like an unexpected amount of tantrums coming, we want to look at what might have caused this to happen, because if we can address the root cause, then maybe we can get back to a place where they're not needing to tantrum so regularly. So the big one that people often don't know about is the dysregulation stages that happen for children. So it's very similar to the Wonder Weeks that you might have heard of when your child is under, I think they go up to like 18 months. But from about 1.5 to 6, the dysregulating periods happen at the half birthdays, and in those periods, your child's this is like a non-technical explanation, but your child's brain is growing so fast that the old connections need to break in order to make space for the new parts of the brain to connect to the old parts of the brain. Obviously, that's not really how it works, but from a conceptual level, it can help to understand it that way. Now, in those periods, it's like your child has like new capacity or new potential, and they need to like figure out, how do I work? It's almost like they've grown an inch overnight and they're not physically noticing that they're taller, and how does that make them move differently? It's like a cognitive version of that. In those periods, a lot of people will be saying, don't worry, it'll pass. I don't say, don't worry, it'll pass. I say, if you're overwhelmed and now's not the time to do something about it, then yes, it will pass. But this is the perfect time to be looking at regulation, because their emotions are right there. So learning to be skillful with emotions during this period means that the disruptive time that it happens is much shorter. It means your child has less time in discomfort, and it's a great time to make a lot of ground on emotional awareness, on articulating your emotions, and also on getting your needs met skillfully. So that's one of the ones. Other ones are, things that are more obvious, like big changes, like if your family has, you've had a separation, or you've had a new partner come along, they've started school, changed rooms at daycare. These kinds of things can be like bigger. One of the ones that sometimes doesn't get noticed is when it's not when the new sibling is first born. Sometimes that's a more obvious one to see, but sometimes the one we miss is that when a baby is around about the age of 8 months, when they become less of a doll kind of being and more of a full person. That can be a huge adjustment for an older sibling. That can be one that we don't often associate, because we've already been through the new sibling stage, but it's a different stage when they become more of a person and taking up space in a more energetic way. Other things that we want to look for is like any clues at all that what was changing when the tantrum started. And so basically those give us a clue as to what does your child need to adjust to this change, or what does your child need in order to get needs met in a way that they used to get them met in a way that's no longer possible, right? These are the things that will give us clues as to what to do there. Now, number 3, when your child is having big, intense tantruming stages and it's come out of nowhere, really look at recharging when they're not tantruming. So often in this stage, because you're not used to having a tantruming child, you're not used to, at the drop of a hat, turning on into, being the safe space and holding space for your child. You're not used to the intensity of emotion and how that impacts yourself. And so what we want to do is make sure that, first of all, remembering that it's going to happen again. So in between the tantrums, we want to just genuinely recharge. But we also want to recognize how much are we taking a long time to get back to regulated ourselves, which sometimes is longer than before the next tantrum happens, right? So you want to be looking at what regulation skills do you have for yourself, and how can we make sure that that's as efficient as it can be, and really charging yourself up. So as an example, for me, when I'm overwhelmed, I often will revert to watching a TV series as often as I can. And that, for me personally, that is a distraction or numbing technique. Now, for some people, binging television really fills them up. It's like they're the way that they're like, maybe what you watch maybe is a little bit more nourishing than what I choose to watch, but also maybe it's just the way you're maybe like understanding it as an art form, or participating in storytelling. It's like the old version of like sitting around a campfire and telling stories. It's like now our new version is sitting around a television and listening to stories being told to us, right? it can be a truly recharging activity for you. But if you're like me and you're using that as a distraction or numbing technique, we want to avoid using distraction as much as we can, because what it does is, if you imagine like your emotions have gone up to here, if you choose to do a distracting or numbing technique, the emotions are still here, you're just not looking at them, right? And then as soon as your child starts tantruming again, you're starting from way up here already, right? And that makes it harder for you to stay calm. It makes it harder for you to be skillful in your space holding, and it just makes life more difficult. So we want to really look at what works best for you to truly recharge between the tantrums. Now, when your child is tantruming, if you even if you don't know how to help them to calm down, do your best to stay close to them. So if they want you to go away, only go as far away as it takes for them to stop telling you to go away. But we want to stay as close to them as they will allow us while they are upset. And this is true even if you don't know how to help them. We want them to feel like their emotions are not too big that you need to leave. Now, if you have to leave, don't stress about that. If you need to be doing the dishes or the dinner's going to burn, or you really can't stay with them, you just want to explain to them that I can see you're still upset. I need to finish the dinner or else it will burn, or whatever the real reason is that you can't stay with them. But assuming you can stay with them, I want you to stay with them even if you don't know how to calm them down. This helps their nervous system to feel safe and helps them to regulate as best they can as time goes on. And your last action to take when your child is tantruming really suddenly and all of a sudden it's happening all the time is to decide whether you're going to wait this out or whether you're going to do something about learning the skills to help them to regulate. And the benefit of waiting it out is only if one of two things is true. One is you don't have the capacity to learn something new right now. Remembering that, that there's just no one I know that has the privilege of having ideal circumstances for them to, be their best parenting potential. Like, I just don't know anyone who's in that situation. And so if you don't have the privilege of being able to stop and learn a new skill right now, whether that's the financial side of things or whether it's the time or the brain space, if you're in a situation where you just don't have the capacity to take on something new, then wait the stage out. It will pass. Your child can learn emotional regulation at a later stage. There's no deadline. We're in a position where things aren't perfect, right? That's just the way it is. And if your best option is to wait it out, then your best option is to wait it out, and it's totally okay. I said there was two parts to that. So one is that you can't, and the other situation I say is even if you don't have the capacity to take it on, if the tantrums are impacting you so much that you're actually not able to get other things done. So say, for example, you actually can't get your work done, which means you won't be able to pay the bills because of the intense amount of emotional energy that's going into the tantrums, just as an example, right? Or it's getting in the way of your own physical health because your own stress levels are so high, it's impacting your health. In those cases, we want to do everything we can to get a strategy in place rather than wait it out, because it's having bigger impacts, even though it's going to be hard for you to find the way. Now, if neither of those things are true for you, then we do want to take action, right? There's no reason to wait out a stage other than you can't, right? That's the only reason that we would want to. So what does that look like? Learning how to actively help your child to calm down is using your tone of voice, your word choice, and your body language. We're helping your child to actively calm down in that moment. These are skills that you can learn in my free webinar on Supporting Kids Through Tantrums. In that webinar, I'll take you through the step-by-step of what to do, how to say what you need to say, how to decide, how to tailor it to your own child, because it is there are differences in how each child will respond to particular word choices or particular body language. We want to really tailor that to what your child needs as well. So this is a skill set that you can learn, and in that webinar I give you the step-by-step, and you'll have a recording so you can go back to it and make sure that you keep refining your skills. That free webinar is at jodithornton.com/tantrums. And if you catch a live version, you'll have a chance to ask your questions live. And if you catch a replay, you can always reply back to the email and just let me know any questions that you have, and so we can get you through to that place where your child is tantruming less often. When they tantrum, it is less intense and it doesn't take as long for them to calm down. That's our aim for the skill set around holding space for tantrums. Thank you so much for watching.